We have seen escalating attempts by the Trump administration to use the full force of the federal government to criminalize constitutionally protected protests against Israel's conduct of the war in Gaza. First, it was the kidnapping and disappearing of a legal permanent resident married to an American citizen for his protected First Amendment activity, as we saw with recent Columbia grad student Mahmoud Khalil. Then it was the snatching and disappearing of an international Tufts student and Fulbright scholar, Rumeysa Ozturk, for writing an op-ed in her school paper that was critical of both the university and of Israel. Now, this criminalizing of free speech and dissent is being encouraged by outside groups. Just today, a pro-Israel group called for an official Department of Justice investigation into a children's content creator, many of you may know, Ms. Rachel, for, quote, spreading Hamas propaganda. To be clear, she has done no such thing. But, again, it would be constitutionally protected if she did, because it's a free country. They're going to keep pushing and pushing until something stops them. And then yesterday, we saw an absolutely chilling story out of Michigan, where immigration agents detained and demanded to search the phone of an American citizen at the Detroit airport after he returned from a vacation with his wife and 2 daughters. His name is Amir Makhled, and he broke no laws. He's a lawyer himself, and his only infraction, at least as far as we can tell in the eyes of the Trump administration, appears to be that he represents a pro-Palestinian demonstrator who was arrested at the University of Michigan last year. And that attorney, Amir Makhled, joins me now.
Well, thanks for having me, Chris. Well, what happens next is when I get to the immigration checkpoint and I'd speak to a passport officer, they ran my passport, which happens routinely whenever you're coming in through the border. But the strange part is the agent looked up and looked to another government officer and asked if the TTRT team was available. And I didn't recognize that acronym, so I did a quick Google search while I was just standing at the desk there. And it turns out that term meant the Tactical Terrorism Response Team, which, you know, dropped my heart into my stomach. I almost nearly hit the floor thinking about what the heck that could be about. So I looked over at my wife and I said, honey, they're gonna take me in for questioning. I'm pretty confident that they're gonna ask me to step into an interview room. And lo and behold, you know, another agent comes out and says, sir, follow me. And so as I was walking into the interview room, I asked them, well, are my wife and children free to leave? And they said yes. So my wife and kids waited outside for nearly 2 hours while I was being interrogated by Customs and Border Patrol protection officers. What's interesting in this situation is that as I was sitting in an interview room, a plainclothed agent who wouldn't identify himself to me asked me if, you know, I was carrying my cell phone. And I said yes, and he says, well, first off, let me just say this. We know who you are, we know that you're an attorney, and we know that you represent some high-profile clients. And the only high-profile case I'm involved in right now is the representation of a young lady named Samantha Lewis. And she's involved at the University of Michigan and was engaged in political speech and protesting against the war in Gaza. And in our defense, we're going after the criminalization of free speech in the University of Michigan case. And so we've made a lot of public remarks about that topic, and we stood tall with our clients on that issue. So as this conversation with this agent was going, he said, listen, he hands me a pamphlet which had a federal statute on it and said, listen, we're allowed to take your phone, even if you're an American citizen, and we can hold it for several days or weeks even, and then give it back to you once we're done going through it. Or you can comply with us right now, give us the password, and let us go through it. And I said to them, well, guys, you already know, there's 2 agents in the room. You already know that I'm an attorney, and you know that a substantial amount of my work is going to be on my phone. And in these days, everything's electronic anyways.
Right.
You know, there's nothing left to paper filings in court. I have my entire, all my emails, my text messages, all my files, my work product. It's all contained in my phone. And so I tell them everything that's in my phone could be considered work privilege and is attorney-client privilege. You have no right or authority to go through the contents of my phone, especially because you know I'm an attorney, and I'm not giving you that unfettered access to my phone. They said, listen, we could do this 2 ways. Either we could take your phone, and you're not going to have a phone for several days, or you can just give us the access. I said, I'm not giving you the access when I have privileged communications on my cell phone. Well, that charge, put him in a position where he had to go speak to his supervisor. He comes back several minutes later and says, why don't you write down, he gave me a legal guide, why don't you write down what it is that you feel is privileged, and we won't go through that stuff, we'll go through everything else. I said, what kind of a futile exercise would that be? I've got to go through, nearly 15 years of communications and emails and files to say, this is privileged and this isn't? I said, that's ridiculous. It's an impossibility to go through all that stuff. So we came after, this is going on for nearly an hour and a half. We came to the final pass. He said, listen, again, if you want to leave here with your phone, you're going to have to give us access.
Right.
And so they asked me, why don't you just show us the contacts in your phone? They wanted to know who my contacts were. They wanted to do a data dump of all the contacts in my phone. And I said, well, and he said, do you believe that that's privileged information? I said, it very well could be, but, I don't want you to take my phone away from me either. Right. So I agreed to let them see my contacts only. And so once they did that, they came back and wanted to question. They gave me a list of about 5 or 6 names of contacts that were on my phone. I wanted to know how I was associated with these folks, what's my relationship to them, where did I meet them, how did I know them? And I said, now you're getting too far. Everybody that's in my phone is either going to be a family member, a friend, or a client. So it wasn't random. This is not something where I was just randomly selected. Right. They knew who I was. They knew my history. They knew I had represented high-profile cases. They told me we looked you up and they were ready to ask me pointed questions about certain things. And because he brought up the high-profile case, it led me to believe that they're targeting me specifically because I've taken up the defense for this young lady, Miss Samantha Lewis. They were Customs and Border Protection agents, just wearing plain clothes. He showed me a badge, but he wouldn't tell me his name.
Vote for whoever you want, but shut the fuck up about Donald Trump being worse on Palestine.
I'm voting for Dr. Jill Stein.
Jill Stein, you have my vote.
Days before the presidential election in the U.S., the Abandon Harris campaign is rallying support for Green Party candidate Jill Stein.
If you don't want to vote for Jill, vote for Donald Trump. But do not give a vote to Kamala Harris.
I'm Al Masri. I live in North Carolina and I'm here visiting Michigan.
Why are you here in this event today?
To push the swing state of Michigan not to vote for Kamala Harris and to vote for Jill Stein. The issue is that Michigan has an effect on the entire country. If in Michigan, where we have the largest concentration of Arab Americans, Kamala Harris still wins, then it would be a defeat for all of us to encourage everyone we know in Michigan to vote against Kamala Harris.
And, the whole, if you vote for Stein, then you're voting for Trump. No, that's not true. If you vote for Jill Stein, you're voting for Jill Stein, okay? So whoever wins, if it's one of the two, whatever, that's not my problem.
Did you vote in November?
Stein.
Not just Democrats saying you're helping Donald Trump. Donald Trump is saying, he said at a rally, Jill Stein, I like her very much. You know why? She takes 100% from them. Donald Trump seems to like your candidacy. Steve Bannon has said the same thing. Why? According to the Associated Press, just last week, Jefferson Thomas, a longtime Republican Party operative from Colorado, submitted petition signatures that his GOP law firm gathered on behalf of your campaign in New Hampshire. Republicans are cynically working to get you on the ballot. The Republicans, it's not just Republicans saying you're helping Republicans. You yourself seem to endorse that message, Jill Stein, over the weekend. You liked a comment on Instagram which said, and I quote, "The Dems need to be stopped. Either vote for Trump, or if you can't, then vote Green."
We're voting for Trump. And that's the sentiment, not just of an 8-year-old, but of an entire community.
I'm not just voting for Trump. I am endorsing him and telling my community to vote for him as well.
I voted for Donald Trump.
We support Donald J. Trump for his commitment to promoting family values and protecting our children's well-being, especially when it comes to curriculums and schools. We are with President Trump because we want a strong border.
What brought you out here tonight? Abandon Harris brought me out here tonight.
I want to make one thing very, very, very clear. We are going to do everything in our power to make sure Kamala Harris doesn't win. Vote for, if you want Donald Trump to win, say that. I will vote for Satan if I have to. I don't care who we gotta deal with for the next 4 years, as long as you motherfuckers know that you fucked up and you guys are gonna deal with some type of repercussion for what happened for the last 10 months. I don't care who we vote for. I'm voting for independent candidate, either Jill Stein or Cornel West. I know they're not gonna win. We're gonna make sure, I'm gonna do everything I can to make sure that bitch does not win and the Democrat Party loses the election.